I'm going to ask you who are listening in your locations to mute your microphones. You, of course, can unmute it if you need to break in, and if there's a technical problem or what have you. Questions in the chat window in WebEx, and so feel free to type something in there. I'm not paying attention to it until after the presentation because it's very distracting, but something to start with when we finish the presentation and move Q&A. And then we'll let Mike and Jonathan mod as we do that. You'll need to be patient on another muting microphones, feedback and static, as with listening site simultaneously. To talk to the CNU Utah chapter members with the many accomplishments of the chapter. Of course, here we got to see inside many of the accomplishments that have already happened, and so it's inspiration for the rest of the country. Show them and tell you some stories that'll be inspiring on your end, and I look forward to at the end of that. I'm going to go camera so that they'll say with. The first everybody about, and ensuring your practices, whether you're a developer or a designer, official, or probably already in this way, but we are as urbanists really before and after business. We look at places the way they already exist, and then we realize how they might be changed over time from places that they are to the place where they ought to be. In grades, we visualize change before it occurs, before and after. Now, a quick tech check here. I'm sure if you could just let me know with your voice, it's coming through clear and everything on the screen. Okay. Now, sometimes this before and after work involves the creation of whole new places or building on previously undeveloped sites or large-scale infill sites. We've been working on one of those kinds of locations in stuff. A lot of the folks there do Buena Vista the way we would present in Florida, but that's just the way it goes. Sometimes urbanists get the opportunity to work on a previously undeveloped site and design it in whole cloth to draw on the map that arrange the basic street infrastructure and lots and blocks and so on. Contrary, the vast majority of the time, and really this has been true of the movement from the beginning, despite the contrary, the time we're working on places that have already been built somehow, many times retrofitting, places, imagining how they might be changed. This is very challenging, slower. The before and after there is always a good deal more dramatic because many of the or designed places on our continent were made for before and after, but the gap between what we have and what we'd like to create is greater. And it's more challenging because we're in a period, I think, historically, where we're going to be switching from architecture and buildings poking out of parking lots to happens a much finer grain from more coarse urbanism to intricate one. One dependent on things like the building to street relationships and the design detail of streets than the old model. In this overall era was wider roads are better roads, and even as a standalone project like an asteroid of its own. So there's that. I like to remind people to think about this work. Is representing three different sets of lenses through which you can see the after business of urbanism. The middle one, the kind of meta view, is the one that gets into the attention. And it's the one that determines whether things work. It's sound engineering and technicality. The machine about the city is, well, does the toilet flush? Is there in the fire hydrant to fight a fire? things like that. And it matters. And it translates into street design, things like how you move from here to there for your daily needs. So that's most of the attention. It's where most of the standards are centered. It's where environments are into law or in manuals. Pause right here and ask a couple of you who just joined the call. Mark Vlasic, I think your mic is one of them. Mute your microphone. You're going to look for that participant window on the screen. And over the right, you're going to see a microphone icon with a slash through it. Click it, and then it'll turn red, and that means your mic is getting warm. Pause here and give you guys a chance to mute your microphone. We're going to get some really ferocious feedback. Okay? Now, John, is that in one of the big listing sites, or is that an off site? Good. On the side, the leftmost column here is a different way of thinking about the city. This is viewed the same way a wildlife biologist would look at an endangered species habitat. A really high score is a really high speciesness index like the Amazon rainforest or a watering hole. Those are great places to find food and really young and that. So you can think about the city that way too. About it like that human habitat. And one place to raise your kids. Is that a good place to grow old? Can you find the things you need in daily life there? And so the city, and you go with a different set of criteria, not necessarily the ones that are written into the standards. Ones that require a little more design thinking and more interpretation and place-specific response. Now look to the side of the screen, and there's the third lens. This is almost always ignored. And the one that turned out, I think, to be pretty darn essential. The way of thinking about the city that involves whether this city ideas. If not, you will act with other people. And whether you will stand in a public space and not feel good there. City Beautiful. The art lens is the one that is almost never addressed in any kind of how-to manual on designing cities or streets, for that matter. And yet it's very important. So let's spend going back and forth between these three different ways of looking at the city as we talk about street design. My background, known to many of you, John Massingale is an architect and urbanist in New York City. And on this great journey, years ago, we were on street design. It's a topic for a long time. I think you understand it. We'll just knock that right out. We'll have a book by Christmas. And we finally had a book. Not quite by Christmas, not quite by New Year's, but by late January. Longer than we thought. Because we went out and went back to the places that we remembered as this topic. And we reflected, and we took about 18,000 pictures. And measured a lot of things. And then we stayed up late at night arguing about a lot of things. And we asked friends for their opinions. Where are the best streets? Who's got your favorite and why? In fact, there's a big group, whose names here on the screen, of friends and collaborators wrote essays that we included in the book on street design. And that adds a lot to the perspective that's in there. So anyway, the book's new, and I hope you guys get a chance to get your fingers on it and go through it. And think about it. Lucky, and we sell a ton of copies of it. Well, we might get a second printing, and you'll no doubt. Yes. Here's that. that is about. It basically says street design has been a hallmark of advanced civilization for a long time. Even when they said all roads lead to Rome, that was the means of communication, literally, when communication included transportation. The Roman Empire communicated with its far-flung holdings. It was the way they actually managed to come in, to communicate. So that's the idea. I think if you follow the history of street design, what you're going to discover is that there were many moments in street design when the ends of a society, not just to have good plumbing or to make traffic flow, but aspirations about the civilization expressed in street design, expressed in the architecture, often simultaneously. And of course, for all those other streets. Let's contrast those two. I feel like just put them on the screen side by side. But streets that were built during the spring, and the roads are better roads there, fail on almost every one of the tests in three lenses. Even the streets that were built with a functionalist mindset for one subject, which is the through movement of large numbers of automobiles, don't all that well for that. So we've inherited this kind of dysfunctional landscape, and it's when you spend time going back and looking at historical examples and compare them to the way our streets have metastasized. So it's in a way we were kind of provoked into making a book. It's where we want to go back to the old days, but about what's happened. It's worth looking at for like before organized, before the pedestrian street and off to the side, and then often pushed out altogether. Broadway here. This is Broadway in New York City when Broadway cars running along the street. The building design can be white. The building, the distance, the time tower, that's the one. The chemical building, that's the one that falls down in Times Square on New Year's Eve. There's an interaction between horse and buggies and pedestrians, cyclists, and users. They space simultaneously, and they're basically proceeding at the pace that's set by pedestrians. They're all moving slowly as pedestrians, but they're moving at a pace at which pedestrians can coexist in the environment. Street waiting to catch the cable car. Sure, it was a shared space, and the pace was very slow. And the emphasis in architecture was about holding the scene. There's a reason why the tall building at the end of the street terminates that vista. And I'd frame it in the way that they do. So by comparison, I'll dawn those aspirations. Everything with audio and video, just doing a quick check. Sure that the audio and video are all working as they should.
Yeah, just a reminder for everyone else to make sure you mute.
Yeah, it helps a lot. Now, since that, as we deeper and deeper, even the urbanists for decades, we were onto a subject of key importance. Streets made more difference, and they are a great indicator of civilization and decline. We often about keypad polling devices at public meetings. Ask questions and then let people see on the screen the results of. And not till we had a very big audience. School, they all fought back about those stories that Mom and Dad told about walking 5 miles in the snow, uphill, and so on. And this was their answer. A lot of them. Okay, what about yourself?
Sorry, that's my phone.
What about yourself? When you were a kid, did you walk to school at some point? A smaller number, but still a big number, and an audience composed primarily of baby boomers and people slightly older. A number of them remembered walking to school themselves. And then he asked, next, what about grandkids or kids in your family? Do walk to school? And to the number. Now, it doesn't say that walking to school is the sole indicator of success or failure in community design, because we know that's not the case. There are factors besides community design that affect this. But it's just of how the change was in our relationship as citizens to our street spaces. Well, look at this sent me not long ago. It's a big photo of an utterly tragic moment, one in which at least just to the idea that quality and about one and our public spaces are long haul. And look in the middle of this picture, who happens to use a wheelchair to move around, and the daily experience from back and forth across the street. Look at the comparison that John Massingale does and recreated. Avenue in the Upper East Side in Manhattan. It's 100 years ago when the Lexington Avenue subway line was being installed, and that's why the sidewalk here is covered with some wood planks during construction. Now, from this angle, and you're actually looking at the same building. I'll use cursor here just to point out a couple things. If you look closely at the building on the bottom, space to the bottom of the building, and then you can see the stoops, those elegant old brownstones of the great. And then on the right of that, past the little toddlers, sidewalk, and the relatively narrow street or carriage for the now, here's that same water tank table just above the edge. And here, the road got expanded. And the sidewalk greatly reduced. And filled no dale in. And they're basically trying to find the person that invented the saw to slice the architectural detail off of the wall things. It was all the same mission, which create the city around the needs of automobiles and modernity. And callousness with regard to the nurture city. Just explains what I think in many ways, even in our most friendly city in the whole continent, what happened. We were provoked about those things, but we were also provoked by a sense that there's a quiet, well, not all quiet, but often quiet revolution underway in spaces in which the cyclists, transit users, street lovers are basically saying, once a week's away, only those, but now we're coming back out there. Ready or not, here we come. We're renting bike share bikes. We're going back out into those spaces. Get used to us being there. And that's all encouraging. The question is, how can we find it and use it to advantage instead of just making it vulnerable? That includes things like what happened in New York itself, uh, until very transportation. Jeanette Kahn. She did things like going out into the middle of the street here in Madison Square and in front of our building with a crew and putting boulders and pots with plants in them and movable furniture. Taking space that had been for decades devoted solely to cars and back into service for pedestrians. An interesting thing happened when she's in New York. They folks who owned dwellings and offices and hotel rooms upstairs, those knew exactly what to do. They just streamed out of the building and went right into that public space, and they sat those movable chairs. Natural thing. And interesting enough, no complete traffic meltdown resulted from these kind of changes, or the pedestrians into most of Times Square. No car, just happiness and increased party value. So then going on in the background while we were. So we got what the things were that people do over that would consistently create value and make happy, too difficult. So think about this scene from the Strandwagen in Stockholm. Here you have what happens. Somebody does main sounding thing of line on or on a map and trees in a row, close together, some trees. Yet there's nothing elaborate besides just restraint. Utter simplicity, but look at the result. Look at what Cyclist Center, his experience, his habitat, his patient, the commute. And really easy to do, and I'm sure why it's not replicated more often. Is that it was very recently that theirs and their clients lose traditions behind. In Pleasant Park in Charlotte, which was a streetcar suburb designed by the great Nolan, no teens foresee that this space, if they cover things, trees in a row, using safe, would one day result in the experience of most cars. You see that this is there. In 1910, it was a everyday conversation among designers and developers to choose native species. But Nolan said, let's go find the trees that are working on this landscape, these soils, and this weather. Those trees now sound like a basic green building principle. Native species. Well, if you go back to places that for a long time, you can see what a great gift they've given themselves. You share there, you're sharing with the experience of a climax forest, which is that our street design is exclusively for big cities or for the Times Square kind of places. And those experiences I'm talking about aren't just for Minneapolis or Gotham City. They're also for Smallville and Mayberry. And our traditions run that whole range. We've been making great towns, great leafy suburbs, great downtowns, great metropolis, long time using traditions of street design. We just adjust for context. And when we the message is this: when we get it right, there's kind of wholeness, WHOLE, ensemble. That sends any one single design. I mean, here, could you the architecture or the street dimensions or the lands or density, the mix of uses, the architectural detail, which thing would you give the credit to for that intersection being so beloved and so populated? These are not actors. We didn't hire these people to stand there for the photograph. Everyday scene in that. So when right, it just consistently produces value according to all three lenses. Works well, makes money, sustains, and the humans who call it their habitat also inspires people. You get it right, then talk about the street in terms of wholeness, like it's one design problem, not a problem between the curbs for the traffic engineer and the problem for the individual building architect or owner and developer on things, but one integrated design problem. When I speak about street design, I'm really not just talking about curbs and gutters and posts and parking spaces, about the adjacent and building to street relationship. Now, in urbanist, this is why we code this so carefully, why we're so interested in the rule book, the relationships that, despite great variety in the architecture, will produce scenes or imagined in the renderings. It's interesting to me to travel as you move along between climate, culture, geography. You find very consistent things. That mediation in the building walls and their in this case in Boulder, those porches, those things, and the public space, or in urbanism, the public realm. And there's which consistently work, like, for example, the street trees that are positioned here between the space moving back and forth, parking, and where the pedestrians are walking. Right in new things. This is old street with brand new buildings. Brand new, and at this point they're probably 15 years old, but they Port Royal, South Carolina, and here, putting the correct side of the sidewalk, public space with the front porch and the shallow dooryard. Sorry to hit. You see when we leave those details out, or when we forget which side of the building front. And in this case, street design is wrong, not just building design is wrong, but the street relationship is neglected. And value out of this scene. There are streets often fail. So the old towns are the textbook. They are typically slow. So corner where the curbs meet at the corners. They have trees that are planted closer to the intersections. They have taller setbacks, narrower lanes. Natural when you are standing in the historic space, and very difficult to get when you permit the designs. It's way beyond just scenery or curb appeal. It goes to the heart of how people live their daily lives. If you imagine in Bologna, if you imagine what it's like to have that apartment at the end of the street, as a walk down this skin and way, come here, deal with fellow, and buy fresh vegetables. That's no bad. Think about it. The person in that apartment has been able to do that for the last 300 years, if not longer. It's a kind of long dividend that pays and pays and pays when we get those things right. Public realm. That slower pace is important. Simplicity is important as well. And the example from Stockholm proves it. You can also see it on our continent in places like the Great in New Orleans. If you take the avenue, there's that broad median where they had to run a streetcar down. It was just as a transportation corridor. Obviously, they had to find a place where they could put the building and let the streetcar roll. It's median, or as they call it in New Orleans, the new ground. It's very romantic. It sounds like there should be a duel in the street from time to time. It's the neutral ground. At any rate, then on either side of those tracks, they planted trees in a row on both sides. So if you live in the adjacent house, or you go in the Catholic girls' school on the left, your privileges include not just having a streetcar next to you, but having a big linear park with all of those fees every day. That's not just a transportation corridor, but now an amenity maker value to the real estate. Look close at this picture, and you're going to enter these worn spots between the tracks and along the tracks. That's already what those are by joggers, runners, not using this space where it's nice and quiet, you're out of conflict with cars. The soil there is nice and smooth and soft, and streetcar comes, they step out of the way. 7 seconds later, the streetcar is out of the way and back on their worn path and continue their run. This is opposite of the city specialists would recommend today. We fence off the streetcar with barricades and fences, radar if available. One whole big wide groove of space just for the streetcar. Limit the interactions between, say, those pesky pedestrians, joggers, and cyclists and motorists. The transit vehicle sharing the space. So one of that happens. So the most obvious one that many times, despite best intentions, the new urbanists fail on is this link belief. Bad habits and inertia, or something in a traffic calculation or a manual tells them they've got to do it. But somebody on the street has to be too. Take a look at this one. It's even got a bike lane. In case you know, that's what that thing is right in the center of the screen. But of course, I guess all day, and I won't see many cyclists. The government that really encourages anybody to live an active lifestyle or to commute. We often fail. And remember, the failure isn't just on the big arterial through-going streets. It's also on the typical residential street. The west state also got a lot of space for their topic. Cable has a trench underneath that asphalt that is the optimal width, is the optimal distance from the nearby trench that has a sewer pipe or water pipe, the electrical pipe, and that is being thought of as that machine, the center column. It's perfect. It works as intended according to all the engineering standards. The curve is nice and broad, so if somebody decides to speed, of course, given its design, they will decide to speed. And matched to the steering of the technology of your vehicle. Every house, the requisite number of parking spaces. There's cases and so on. So the 100% everything they want here, and a place 80%. And you find the same kind of thing. This example is from Hawaii, but they're into that street tree that was close to the intersection, or that small turning radius. We need the standards if we're going to make the places that the new urbanists aspire to and draw in our renderings, because if the standards book or the public works manual or the AASHTO Green Book tell you to build it like this, there's something in that picture. The clear sight triangles and corners the plan indicate all of the on-street parking spaces envisioned in small new urbanist development in North Carolina. If you avoid the triangle rules in that town, that's how many street parking spaces you have to eliminate. There's a root assumption about the speed of the vehicles in the street. If you're going time to react, you need to be able to see around the corner to avoid a conflict from A. And and it results in hundreds of feet and to street trees and on-street parking, build that back, so on. Really low there is about fusing safety. Occupants inside the vehicle and for everybody. A bike street, which has been designed for the safety of the occupant, with their bags and their seat belts, so on, their crumple zone, and but here, all rules, they've failed the other person who might be outside of the vehicle. Emphasizing flow. You can't blame them. Flow. Flow just sounds natural. Flow sounds like I want to do it. What does it? Stoppage or blockage. I easily understand how and later a plan that new technologies for driving decided was against everything else. Well, those details, small design lanes, small corners, street parking, short sight triangle, and the battle of the week for environment. In it, Charles Brewer struggled with Glenwood Park, and because he was full and wealthy and patient, he stayed with that battle for a really long time, and eventually got the city of Atlanta to allow him to build Glenwood Park in the way it was meant to be built. But not after an epic battle that other developers would not have had the time or money or stomach. And that kind of figure of richer men in the street detail. So in there with those intentions, new urbanist plans, we don't find them stand rejected. So bringing up here, might rise like this. It's all one thing. When the pace is slow and pedestrian. Simplicity is virtue in designing the street spaces. If we the city is not just a co-engineering, but instead also a collective work of art, it's composed. Extending those spaces, we will make different decisions. And we'll have, if it's not beautiful and leaves an impression, to make address that sense of wonder that comes in the great street. You can see examples historically that prove our species was really good at this. One tree that leans in here on Oxford. Simplest move, one little design decision, change everything about seeing that street. Now, plays in very designs, like it's a long, straight, ideal, classic boulevards of Paris, City Beautiful movement. That's one part of the way. So, it goes in a city that lends itself to being served and more compact, that less cycled and having its values rise over time, having new uses replace old ones in old buildings. Year after year, the ability subject was a subject. So the Neil that location matters. Why is a great location? Well, because the heart of Paris is located there. Right? So you have a terrific location, a really great location, still kill it in bad street. Look at this is a really very good location and utterly alien design. So we don't see the real estate values generated here. We know the recycling taking place here. Well, the buildings are replaced 7 years with more trees on the wrong side of the sidewalk. Where accumulate, bad time can sustain what otherwise be a great location, and thus thwart sustainability. Stay with the idea for a minute. So the axial vista meant to impress visitors, to give you a order and the orderly workings of the nation state and what have you. That was at work in the Paris of the dog. Certainly not do it. But we find so many streets and picturesque and still produce phenomenal results. One in design will spend the time you make a street design to create a sensation that it is one big idea, axially and extruded along its length. And then design will street as a whole series of experiences that are segmented, that are to end, and are sizes, and are each different, depending on topography and to local needs. And so is the Wasite in district principles cities that we've seen. That's all of these things I'm describing are in constant tension, and they're not just for ancient or antique cities. They're you can see in that work the juxtaposition of the natural and the man-made, the long axis meant to message, not just provide a lot for real estate. Edit that give a chance to get to know their neighbors and form some bonds that in the street space. Just happened in the sun. I want to make sure my friends in the Mountain West hear me say this. You know, I have a lot of pictures of streets with homes and I'm coming to you from Miami. The observation about the street relationships, trees, they play in wind places and steep places and snow. There's a written phenomenon now about pick up on the place where that you have and it can be different. Part of that means when you redesign the street, you also remake the rules. So here's a case where as one act, you redesign itself, actually took out a big S curve and made it much more cranky and slow, and for the development of the adjacent buildings, some of which you can see in the background in this picture. According to the new rules, so they had the new street relationships baked in. They weren't just doing engineering of the street in one flow or in one division of the city, one division, the development, thinking, design of architecture, other, we're actually able to get the so beautiful streets. And if you do them all separate, then you're not thinking about the city three-dimensional and pretty experienced place that everybody wants. See how some of those, which is how master plans often seem like you throw in the ocean and you wait to see what beach you wash up on. In Bold Village Center. Here, they really implemented things that were in their 1994, 1995 plans. We were told we'll never see bike lanes, we'll never see on-street parking, every building's well close to the street, see buildings about lots in front, mixed-use, multi-story, denser development, trees, and those things, they come true. In fact, I recently, and I saw this, I asked Boulder, where are all the bodies buried? We'd heard times, unless it's a dead body. So I figured there's a lot. It turns out they just came there a bit, which is to say, here's the same place from just earlier. It was in where approach strip, few randomly spoken out of parking lots, and you could see how it was going to go. that went next wasn't great. And instead, they planned themselves and made it come to this. All instruction. One time, because it's a hot topic, talking about integration of bikes into the city. And when the cars know they have to move along in those street spaces at a pace that it's easy to integrate bikes. And in fact, this is like in Barcelona on the left, Amsterdam on the right, for specialized bike lanes or lots of paint and other things, because the cars there are moving pretty slowly. And we've got a whole generation of people that just want to use those same streets with those same ways. And you can see the face of this person here with the green helmet, kind of about entering the car space, is on the right, and whether or not they should try to take this intersection. Is apprehensive about entering the public space. We have, I think, to get rated for all those who use the street so many different ways. Cyclists, there's also users and pedestrians and people trying deliveries and make money in their storefronts, make their cash register ring. This street, boulevards in Paris, not one of the ones that the tourist book would tell you to see. It's a tourist, but instead filled with ordinary Parisians just wondering about their lives. From left to right here, you can see the storefronts, the deliveries, the cars. You can see the transit system station in the middle of the picture. You can see track, which track runs between those trees in the Great Promenade in the center to the subway. So this is a force of multimodalism. There, they haven't had to here with above one story because options besides living stuck in traffic. Now, the photograph of multimodalism unfolding in the new complete streets movement in America. Breakthrough achievement, actually, Long Beach. Long Beach is a hit city, a city sometimes called the Brooklyn of Los Angeles, and on bikes. And they went through and carefully remade streets, following all the manuals, and doing what they could on a limited budget. Actually, I just want to talk about this approach to cyclists to use the city. In fact, the Long Beach example is particularly poignant when you think about the car turning left that crosses the track of the bike, which has to swerve to the right in order to miss the left turn. This is still auto space. In fact, even markings designed around the applications of motorists in high-speed highway environment. Like the green they use for those greens in the complete streets movement is the same color green that they use for the exit sign on the interstate highway. It's auto. And so here's an effort that I don't want us to slow down on, but one that leaves out a lot of those factors, like the common character of the city. Street, we think this is better where they came in and restriped it and put one street parking spaces in, but it really a complete street yet. We need what John Massengill calls complete streets. That it's not yet beautiful, it's not a complete street. We're elaborate and successful ones like this avenue in New York that was First Avenue. The old cars in the new street, after the design, has special spaces for bikes and special space for buses, and an improvement worthy of our applause. But on the other hand, it's also a riot of beams and stripings and reflectors and signage and ugly white plastic sticks. Well, the message is tend to the public realm with that bike of yours, or the legs of yours. But remember, this is auto space. The bolder and brighter the striping, while we understand the benefits, for the message, this is auto space. Now, think about the phase we're in. We're the goal of our streets, recalibrating and rebalancing it, and got to think about how to and integrate new technology, and make them city places, make them active living spaces, make them work places, be sensitive to storm water that lands on these streets. That's exactly the time more years ago when the streets, Edison, West, and then in New York City, electric illumination streets. The first and famous one was Broadway. And yet they were hanging wire everywhere and over probably about the light. In fact, why Broadway is called the Great White Way. And that really was into just a decade or two after the film on the upper right was made. Integrating technology of lighting into the street was easy, and people knew how to do it. And I think that's where we're headed. Things like bike lanes and green streets. Hope that is, whether it be now it's a normal and natural thing to do lamp posts and electrical illumination. Back to that photograph was made. Working in his cubicle and over in City Hall in Barcelona, designed the famous lamp posts of Gracia. And even though the street had changed a lot over the years, people love the lamp posts because they are part of the civic art. They're permanent fixtures of civic art in the city. The technology and made the lights, but about the lights. And we haven't gotten to that stage yet. Not with our ugly white and yellow plastic sticks stapled in the street. So I'm looking at the experiences that are from in cities that have been working longer to incorporate, and people who are burning diesel instead of fuel. And so we think, what if we could be more like Holland? What if we could be like Oregon and have a parking problem for bikes? And then what we know is add more rules and more signs and more instructions. I love it. Walkers stay single file. Yeah, in that rule. There are, and a few years ago we just had to go by hunches on these things, and now an emerging body of literature is supporting these conclusions as worth our time. That's coming out about what happens in return for highway investments, other for bikes and beds, for example. Road-only projects getting to one by projects in terms of the job creation, for example. So we can look differently at those places that have been working for longer at balancing the needs of cyclists and pedestrians. Times calls it bicycle dividend. I love that title. Or if you look at Christopher Mims, as 20% loss to the goal, and now a bike instead results in a 42-cent economic gain. You could read the whole study, the URL at the top of the screen, and share it with anybody who wants to see it. I mean, stuff. So now we're starting to understand. Wait a minute. There's myths. There's to be made by getting this right. We had known that for a long time. The property values are amazing, and they like the horse fountain in the middle of the road and put Christmas decorations. Gratified to see people sort of take those spaces in front of their houses. I'm into things of art, however humble. Sometimes you stick something in the middle of the road. Coming down to forth, because we've some recent controversy worth bringing this up, so we can get a question or two in about private developers of the 60s, imagine this not in London, and of where the roads converge, made and out there, and with the architecture. And if you know the Seven Dials, people sit out in the middle of the road and on Monument and watch the parade of people and cars and bikes and trucks that go on, also in calibrated pedestrians. Here, something in the middle of the road, the way we've recently been told is traffic calming or beneficial. Roundabouts, I actually described many a roundabout in a lot of our projects. Do roundabout when it's thought of as auto-only space. Take a look at this. It's internet beginning and color and yellow things and red things and stripy things. The message is very clear to you as a pedestrian. So that's for you. That roundabout, you are barricaded on the edges, but that's for cars. Think about being in the middle of the road in Savannah. It's a square, and you go around it. Or big wide streets in places like Melbourne with skinny ones that are slow, safe, and pedestrian dominated that you can let your toddler walk up. That's they wanted to go through about why streets are so important, and those people will take up design as their cause. I'll leave a list of things that have to be right. The street is shaped well. That's number one. It has to be climate. It has to be connected to its surroundings. It has to be safe. So you're not afraid you're going to be mugged or run over. And it's wonderful. You have to create that memory into a place that will make people want to come back to it over and over. Pull back up in the chat window and see what kinds of questions we have. Jonathan? Michael and others have 700 times mute your microphone. Back to property values when factoring good and bad street design. It is because there are so many factors. Location, and that still is the most important feature. And you have some streets that want to be main streets, and so your economic performance there depends per square foot on the retail space. And it's all about the value of the residential space or the office space. So it varies. But question that the analysis will show again and again and again is you compare the walkable, compact, urban, nice street design spaces, generating higher property values. In Springs, Arkansas analysis a few weeks ago that compared there, sold small street to that of the auto-oriented commercial development on the highway. We found that the per acre back to the government of revenue to be values holds on a per acre basis, twice as beneficial to local government and their revenue, twice as valuable to the owners. So clear, if you start measuring on a per basis, you're going to see the old streets and blocks of Old Town in very outperform the other stuff on the end. Manuals, just jump that one now. Mike put a message about ITE walkable thoroughfares manual. He's a book that was a joint effort for the New Urbanism and the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's context-sensitive solutions for urban thoroughfares. It has been adopted for statewide application by the Texas Department of Transportation. Been deemed by local governments as well. So El Paso, for their use, also adopted this name. We like the CITE manual. I think it's really a breakthrough. It introduces, at least in a teaching way, some context into the idea that one street design all, and as examples for those biggest, widest through-going arterial streets that are missing from the literature until that book came out. And about the next version that's in the works, the 2.0 version of that should drill deeper into context sensitivity with the streets, not just the big ones. And I think this version of the CNU ITE manual will be the basis of us finally getting the right to do urban streets in urban places without a whole series of special exceptions. It's seen it in action, actually. If you talk to stalwarts like Scott Polikoff, he'll do what we saw in the annual has been adopted for statewide application. South Island, Padre Boulevard is their thrilling street in the borderland. Came for that street. And miners simply opened the book to the requisite page and said, this is a cross-section we would like to use. And the DOT district engineers looked at that and squinted for a minute and said, well, if it's here, I guess we're allowed to do it that way. And so instead of the usual battle over street design manual, over to a better street. Now, we got a question from Myron Lee about site triangles and turning radii. I'm going to read it so we don't have your chat window open. That you put in to reduce crashes, turn are set to facilitate long vehicles, like fire engines and school buses. These features away, how use crashes and facilitate the vehicles that are an integral part of our community. This is a great question and answer. When are slow going, the street networks are interconnected. A couple of powerful things happen. You have many ways to get from that vehicle starts off, like the firehouse, go, like to fight the fire. And to be over designed in order to make sure that the vehicle can get through. See, this fear that city like where the cul-de-sacs are at the end of very long branches, the only way to get from A to B. That is that something there to address our victim or to fight a fire. There another vehicle coming in the opposite direction, which will also have its mirrors or outbreakers out. And the space add up to being enough for everybody to get through in multiple directions at the time of the emergency. The problem with the approach is that when you design the city for the big vehicles and oversize the streets, remember that you can have the biggest possible vehicle go one similar sized vehicle goes in the opposite direction at speed. The environment in which the design speed is automatically high, and the speed all the time is very high, and then is generated from the average flash is very high. So in saving the people on the property, you go to a little faster with an on street. What it was, you created a whole series of incidents year after year that are painful to pedestrians. A picture that actually helps illustrate that. So I'll do that for just a second. Now, buses and ordinary fire trucks, not the longest ladder trucks, and moving vans and so on, they are an integral priority and they get around. We just don't have to send them on every street corner at the highest possible speed. Some way, then we're really acknowledging we don't want pedestrians in space. And sometimes I go to a town where I see historic part of town. They had small radii at the corners, just a little bit of black rubber marks on the curve. Walter Kulash would say, that means they got a gentle reminder that there are children and old people in this town. We shouldn't go so fast around these corners. We should be careful. And side triangles, when the speed's slow, they don't have to be so big. The things, there are techniques that you can use. One I always use is ask young drivers of the big fire vehicles what they do when it comes time to fight a fire in the old one. They tell you, I've been down there on many occasions, and we get around those corners. We're really good at driving these vehicles. You set up some cones in a parking lot and let them know how tight a corner they can take. It always is tighter than the software says their big design vehicle. So ask them to do that. Then remember that we're designing cities the last hundreds of years. Joe Riley in Charleston doesn't let his fire department drive by oversized vehicles. He has this of the size that fits the city. And that sense, these vehicles that will last 20 or 30 years, the city you want to build and keep for hundreds instead of Muppet says, in the context of limited funding resources, we do promote building larger networks with less expensive treatment versus focusing resources on a few corridors and places. Right? There are times when the only budget will allow is a quick, lighter, cheaper, quicker solution to paint, and that is, of course, the right thing to do. That's what you do. And we have a continent-wide problem of street reform to that there's not enough money to do a luxury solution on every street. And so understand that. There's been made by Jeff Speck in his really excellent book from 2013 called Walkable City. He says, pick winners. I think it's the places where you're already focused on development, investment, activity, and transit, and make places as beautiful and remotely possible as that you have a whole package in the places we're trying to deliver on promise of those packages. That is the right thing to do. And use paint and do a much cheaper, quicker solution for the demonstration, a test, and a learning process for the permanent, more beautiful solution you want to come in behind it with next year or years later. That's exactly what they did in the New York City DOT. So some of that garish and ugly paint is now starting to be replaced with beautiful, traditional New York way of making streets with granite curves and street tree plantings and what have you. But then more quickly and without necessarily asking everyone for permission for the final permanent solution. So message of tactical urbanism, do something soon, observe it, refine it, learn from it, and more expensive brick solution. That's the last question from the chat window. Michael, Jonathan, what's next?
I think we're just about at time, so unless anyone has any final questions, maybe I think we'll wrap it up.
Well, I'd like to for joining in and for seeing a lot of you at CNU in Buffalo.
Great, really appreciate it. This has been awesome.